When my oldest son passed away, I received a phone call that changed everything. "Ma'am, I've discovered something about your son that you need to know. It's urgent. Come to my office immediately, but don't tell anyone in the family. It could be dangerous." His boss's voice was trembling. When I arrived, I froze at the sight of who was there. I never thought that at 62 years old I would be attending the funeral of my firstborn. Isaiah was only 38, a man of integrity, dedicated to his job as a financial analyst, and above all, an exemplary son. They say no mother should have to bury her son, and now I understood the devastating pain behind those words. Isaiah's body had been found in his apartment 3 days earlier, the victim of an apparent heart attack. No one expected it. He was always healthy, exercised regularly, and had just passed a full physical. The doctors spoke of sudden death, undetected genetic predisposition, cold terms that didn't explain why my son was now inside a coffin. During the wake, I watched my younger son, Terrence, organizing everything with admirable efficiency. He and his wife, Simone, took care of every detail of the funeral while I remained seated, numb with grief. "Mom, just leave it in our hands. You just need to rest," Terrence kept repeating with that protective tone he had been using with me for the last few years. Something bothered me, but I attributed it to my fragile emotional state. Terrence seemed too composed. It wasn't that I expected to see him lose control, but there was an almost unsettling serenity in his demeanor. Simone remained by his side, always attentive, always vigilant, as if she were monitoring every movement around. After the burial in the Woodlawn Cemetery, everyone came back to my house. As the guests served themselves the coffee that Simone had arranged, I sat in a corner of the living room, observing Isaiah's portrait above the fireplace. That's when I noticed the whispered conversations between Terrence and Simone, the exchanged glances. Something seemed out of place. "Mom, we need to talk about the future," Terrence said, sitting next to me once the last guests had left. "This house is too big for you alone. Simone and I talked, and we believe it would be best for you to sell it and move to a smaller condo, or perhaps to that retirement community near our place in Charlotte." The suggestion took me by surprise. "But son, we just buried your brother." "I don't think this is the time to—" "Precisely because of that, Mom," Simone interrupted in her melodious voice. "Isaiah left so suddenly. Life is unpredictable. We need to think about your well-being." I nodded distractedly, unable to process the conversation. That's when the phone rang. Terrence quickly got up to answer it. "Who was that?" I asked when he returned with a tense expression. "No one important," he answered evasively. "Just someone from Isaiah's office wanting to speak with you about some paperwork." "What paperwork?" "Nothing for you to worry about right now, Mom. I told him to call back another time. You need to rest." That night, alone in my room, exhaustion finally overcame me. I was almost asleep when my cell phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Mrs. Audrey?" "Yes?" "I'm Charles Mason, the financial director at the company where your son worked. Ma'am, I need to talk to you urgently in private. It's about your son." My heart sped up. About Isaiah? What happened? There was a pause before he answered. "I can't talk over the phone. Could you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? And please, do not mention this conversation to anyone, especially your other son or his wife." "Why not?" "Please trust me. It's for your own safety. Come at 9 in the morning. The company address is in downtown Detroit." After hanging up, I was awake for hours. Why all the secrecy? What could Charles Mason know about Isaiah that required such discretion? And why specifically mention Terrence and Simone? The next morning, I told Terrence I needed to buy some medicine. He insisted on going with me, but I was firm. "Son, I need some time alone. It's just a drugstore." I drove to the corporate center in downtown Detroit, where Isaiah had worked for over 10 years. The imposing glass and steel building always impressed me. At the reception, I announced that I had a meeting with Charles Mason. I was escorted to the top floor, an executive area I had never been to before. Charles greeted me personally, a middle-aged man with a grave look. Mrs. Audrey, thank you for coming. Please come in. His office was spacious with a panoramic view of the city. He closed the door and activated a button that frosted the window glass. I need to ensure total privacy for this conversation, he explained. Mr. Mason, I'm starting to worry. What is so important and secret about my son? He took a deep breath. Mrs. Audrey, what I am about to tell you will seem unbelievable, but I ask you to listen to me until the end. I nodded, feeling a chill. Your son, Isaiah, came to me approximately 3 months ago with a very serious concern. He discovered serious financial irregularities involving your other son, Terrence. Irregularities? What kind? Diversion of funds from the company where Terrence works. Isaiah discovered it by chance while analyzing some documents that fell into his hands. But that was only the beginning. Charles took a thick folder from his drawer and opened it in front of me. Isaiah discovered that Terrence was not only diverting money, but was planning something much more serious that involved you. I looked at the documents, seeing copies of emails, bank statements, something that looked like a contract for the sale of my house with my forged signature. I don't understand, I murmured, feeling the room spin. Mrs. Audrey, Isaiah discovered that Terrence and Simone have huge debts. Gambling, failed investments, a lifestyle far above what they can afford. They plan to sell your house and transfer all your assets to themselves as soon as possible. But that doesn't make sense. They would need my authorization. Exactly. And that's where Isaiah became truly worried. He found communications between Terrence and a doctor discussing how they could declare you mentally incapacitated to make decisions. I felt as if the air had been sucked out of my lungs. That's absurd. Unfortunately, it's not. Isaiah collected all this evidence. When he confronted Terrence, the situation became dangerous. Dangerous. How? Charles hesitated. Mrs. Audrey, Isaiah feared for his own life. That's when we decided he needed to temporarily disappear. Disappear? What do you mean? Charles looked toward the private restroom door in his office. It opened slowly, and then I saw the impossible. Isaiah walked into the office. My son, whom I had buried 3 days earlier, was alive in front of my eyes. "Mom," he said softly, his eyes glassy. Everything went dark around me. The last thing I remember is hearing Isaiah yell my name as I fell. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the office sofa. Isaiah was holding my hand. For a moment, I thought everything was just a cruel dream. The funeral, the pain, everything. "Mom, it's me," he said, squeezing my hand. "Forgive me for the suffering I caused you. It was the only way to protect you." "How?" I murmured, touching his face, feeling his skin warm and real. "We buried you. I saw your body." "It wasn't me," Isaiah explained gently. "Charles helped me fake everything. The body was of an unidentified man from the morgue with physical characteristics similar to mine. We have contacts who helped us with the necessary documents." I looked at Charles, who nodded gravely. "Why?" was all I could manage to say. "Because Terrence's plans were advancing faster than I expected," Isaiah said. "When I confronted him with the evidence, he didn't deny anything. He told me to stay out of it, that it was necessary, that you wouldn't understand. 2 days later, I received an anonymous warning that someone had been asking around about how to make a heart attack look natural." My body shivered. "You think Terrence would—" "I don't know what he was capable of, Mom, but I couldn't take the risk. If something happened to me, there would be no one to stop his plan. You would be completely vulnerable." "But the funeral, all those people, your friends, colleagues, all necessary," Charles intervened. "If Terrence and Simone suspected Isaiah was alive, they would have accelerated their plans or disappeared. This way, they believe they won. They believe there's no one to stop them. But what do we do now? How do we prove all this?" Isaiah exchanged a glance with Charles. We've been documenting everything since the funeral, every move they make, every document they try to forge. With my death, they became careless. We have enough evidence to guarantee arrests and convictions." Arrests? The word hit me like a punch. "You're saying my son is going to prison?" "Mom, he was planning to drug you, declare you incapable, and steal everything you have. And there are indications he was willing to do worse to achieve that." I fell silent, processing the magnitude of what I was hearing. My youngest son, the boy I rocked, the young man I supported through college, had become a monster I no longer recognized. "What happens next?" I finally asked. "In 2 days, there will be a meeting to discuss your financial assets," Charles explained. "Terrence scheduled it, thinking he would just formalize the transfer of your goods. Instead, the police will be waiting. We already have arrest warrants." "I need to be there." "Mom, it's not." "I need to be there, Isaiah. He's my son. If this is really the end, I need to look him in the eyes one last time." Isaiah nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't negotiable. 2 days later, I arrived at the law office in downtown Detroit that Terrence had chosen for the meeting. He seemed surprised to see me. "Mom, I thought you were resting at home. We discussed that Simone and I would handle this." "I decided I wanted to be present," I said calmly. "After all, it's about my assets." I saw a flash of panic cross his face before he recomposed himself. Of course. It's just that, well, we didn't want to burden you with these legal matters." The lawyer who was supposedly working for Terrence was actually an undercover detective. As the meeting began, he started laying out documents on the table, papers that detailed every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every plan to declare me incompetent. Terrence's face slowly drained of color as he realized what was happening. "What is this? This wasn't what we agreed." That's when the office door opened and 3 police officers entered. One of them approached Terrence. "Terrence Johnson, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." I watched my son being handcuffed, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Simone, who had tried to slip out discreetly, was stopped at the door and also arrested. "Mom!" Terrence shouted as they let him out. "Mom, please, I can explain. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you." But the most shocking moment came when Isaiah walked into the room. Terrence literally stumbled backward, his face going white. You're dead. I saw you. We buried you." "You buried a stranger, Terrence. While you and Simone toasted my death, I was collecting evidence of every one of your crimes." The expression on Terrence's face was one of absolute horror. "Isaiah, I never wanted—" "You never wanted what, Terrence? To kill me? Because that's what you were planning. Or did you think I wouldn't discover the conversations with that medical consultant you hired?" "I would never have gone through with it," Terrence shouted desperately. "It was just a plan, a contingency. I was desperate, Simone and I. We're ruined. We owe money to dangerous people." "And that justified stealing from your own mother, drugging her, destroying her life. Please, you have to understand, I had no choice." "There's always a choice," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since the arrests began. "You could have asked for help. You could have been honest. Instead, you chose betrayal." "Mom, please." Tears were streaming down Terrence's face. "I'm your son. You can't let them do this to me. You stopped being my son the moment you planned to drug me and steal my life," I replied, and the coldness in my own voice surprised me. They took him away, still screaming and pleading. Simone went in silence, her face impassive, as if she had already accepted her fate. When the room finally emptied, I sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Isaiah approached and put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry you had to see this, Mom." "I needed to," I replied. "I needed to see who he really became. Otherwise, I would have spent the rest of my life wondering if there was something I could have done differently." None of this is your fault. I know, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. In the weeks that followed, the story exploded in the Detroit media. Executive fakes death to expose brother's fraud, the headlines screamed. Our family became a spectacle, and I had to endure the humiliation of seeing every sordid detail discussed publicly. Terrence and Simone's trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Terrence received 10 years in prison. Simone, who cooperated with the prosecution and revealed additional details about the plan, got 5 years with the possibility of parole in 3. During the trial, horrifying details emerged. They had planned to put sedatives in my food, gradually increasing the dosage until I appeared confused and disoriented. Then they would take me to a complicit doctor who would declare me incompetent. With medical and legal documents in hand, they would have complete control over my assets. The most chilling part was discovering that the heart attack they planned for Isaiah wasn't just a contingency plan. They had already purchased substances that could induce a cardiac arrest that would be virtually undetectable in an autopsy. If Isaiah hadn't disappeared when he did, he likely would have died for real. After the trial, Isaiah and I tried to rebuild some normalcy. He formally returned to his job, explaining that he had been on a secret mission for the company, a half-truth that the company supported to avoid further scandal. I sold the house in Detroit. There were too many painful memories there. I bought a smaller place in Oakland by the water, where I could see the bay every morning and remember that life goes on, even after the worst betrayals. Isaiah visited me regularly, but I noticed he carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Faking his own death, watching his brother being arrested, the whole experience had left marks on him, too. "Do you regret it?" I asked him one afternoon as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "If you could go back, would you have done things differently?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "I saved your life, Mom, and probably mine too. But yes, there are days when I wonder if there was another way, a path that didn't result in my brother being in prison." "He chose his path, Isaiah. You just revealed it." "I know. But that doesn't make it easier to accept." We sat in silence, both lost in our thoughts. The seagulls called in the distance, and the waves gently lapped against the shore. Life continued, indifferent to our family drama. 3 years into Terrence's sentence, I received an unexpected letter from him. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. The letter was long, filled with apologies and explanations. He talked about the gambling debts, about how Simone convinced him that stealing from me was the only solution. He talked about shame, about not being able to admit he had failed, about how everything spiraled out of control. At the end, he wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I don't even know if I deserve to ask for it. But I want you to know that I think about what I did every day. I think about what I almost did to you, to Isaiah, and I'm horrified by the man I became. Prison isn't punishment enough for what I did. Living with myself is the real sentence." I read the letter several times. Part of me wanted to feel compassion, wanted to believe he was genuinely remorseful. But another part, the part that still woke up at night remembering the coldness in his eyes as they led him away, couldn't fully trust those words. I showed the letter to Isaiah. He read it in silence and then handed it back to me. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think people can change," he said slowly. "But I also think some betrayals are too deep to heal completely. Even if Terrence is genuinely remorseful, what he did, what he planned to do, that can't simply be erased with a letter. Do you think I should respond? That's up to you, Mom. But if you do it for yourself, not for him. Don't let guilt or obligation dictate your actions." I decided not to respond immediately. I put the letter in a drawer and let weeks, then months pass. Every so often I would take it out and read it again, looking for some sign of genuine change or just skilled manipulation. 4 years after Terrence's imprisonment, something unexpected happened. Isaiah met someone, a lawyer named Angela, who worked in the district attorney's office. She knew our whole story. She had even worked peripherally on the case. And still, or perhaps because of it, she fell in love with my son. At their engagement party, a small gathering in my house in Oakland, I watched Isaiah laugh genuinely for the first time in years. The weight he carried seemed lighter, as if Angela's love was helping heal the wounds that betrayal had left. "Your son is a good man," Angela told me as we prepared the food in the kitchen. "What he did to protect you, the courage it took, not many people would be capable of that." "He's always been special," I replied, feeling my eyes well up. Even as a child, he had this sense of justice, of doing what was right. "He told me he still struggles with guilt," Angela continued softly, "for Terrence, for what happened." "Guilt for what? For exposing his brother's plan to destroy us? Guilt for not having been able to save Terrence from himself." Those words hit me, because I understood exactly what she meant. As much as I was angry at Terrence, as much as I knew what he did was unforgivable, there was still a part of me that wondered if I could have prevented it somehow. If I had been more attentive, more involved, if I had seen the signs before everything went so wrong. "Some people can't be saved," I finally said. "Not because we don't love them enough, but because they have to choose to save themselves." Angela nodded, understanding perfectly. Isaiah and Angela's wedding was a simple but beautiful event. As I watched my son exchange vows, promising to love and protect this woman who had brought light back into his life, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: joy for him, for the future he was building, but also a deep sadness for the son who should have been there, standing by his brother, sharing in this happiness. Terrence, in his prison cell in Jackson, probably didn't even know about the wedding. I hadn't told him, hadn't sent any information. It seemed like a cruelty to remind him of what he had lost. 5 years into his sentence, I received notification that Terrence was eligible for parole. As a victim, I had the right to testify at the hearing. Isaiah encouraged me to go, to have my voice heard, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. The night before the hearing, I had a dream. I was in my old house in Detroit, and Terrence was a child again, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He had fallen off his bike and scraped his knee badly. I was cleaning the wound while he cried, and I was telling him that everything would be okay, that the pain would pass, that he just needed to be more careful next time. I woke up with tears streaming down my face, that dream so vivid I could still feel the weight of my child in my arms. At the parole hearing, Terrence looked older, thinner, his hair graying at the temples. When he saw me enter the room, his expression was one of pure shock. "Mom," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe I was there. I listened as his lawyer presented the case for parole, how Terrence had been a model prisoner, had taken classes, worked in the prison library, participated in rehabilitation programs, how he had expressed genuine remorse and had transformed during his imprisonment. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and looked directly at my son. 5 years ago, I would have said that I never wanted to see Terrence again. I began, my voice surprisingly steady, that what he did was so monstrous, so unforgivable, that he deserved every second of his sentence and more. I saw Terrence lower his head, his shoulders slumping. But 5 years is a long time to think, to process, to try to understand how we got here. And I realized something important. Terrence made terrible choices. He planned unconscionable things. But he's still the son I raised, the boy I loved, the young man who once had dreams and hopes before everything went wrong. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I'm not here to say he should be released. That's for the board to decide. But I am here to say that if he's given that chance, if he's allowed to return to society, I hope he uses it wisely. I hope he becomes the man I know he could have been, the man he should have been. I sat down, my heart pounding. Terrence was crying silently, tears running down his face. The parole was denied. The board determined that 5 years wasn't enough for the severity of the crimes. But as I left the hearing, Terrence's lawyer caught up with me. "Mrs. Audrey, Terrence asked me to give you this." It was another letter. I put it in my purse without reading it, not yet ready for more emotional turmoil. That night, in the safety of my home, I finally opened the letter. "Mom, I don't have words to express what it meant to see you today. After all I did, after all I planned to do, you were still there. You didn't speak in my favor, and I wouldn't have expected you to. But you didn't speak against me either. You saw me as a complete person, not just the monster I became. That means more than I can say. I know I have a long road ahead. More years in prison, and even after I get out, a lifetime of trying to make up for what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to ever have a relationship again. But I want you to know that I'm trying to become a better person. Not for parole, not to reduce my sentence, but because I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror without feeling disgust. I love you, Mom. I always have. And I'm so sorry I betrayed that love in the worst possible way. Your son, Terrence." I folded the letter carefully and put it with the first one he had sent. I still didn't know if I could forgive him. I still didn't know if I would ever be able to have a relationship with him again. But something had shifted in me. The burning anger had cooled into something more complex, a sadness for what was lost, but also a small hope for what might someday be rebuilt. Isaiah was less optimistic. When I told him about the hearing and the letter, his face hardened. "Mom, I know he's your son. And I know part of you will always love him, but please don't forget what he was capable of. Don't let pretty words make you forget the reality." I haven't forgotten, Isaiah, but I also can't spend the rest of my life consumed by hatred and resentment. It's eating me from the inside. It's not about hatred. It's about protection. If Terrence gets parole, if he gets out, I don't want him anywhere near you. He's still your brother. "No," Isaiah said firmly. "A brother doesn't plan to murder you. A brother doesn't plot to destroy his own mother. Terrence stopped being my brother the day he decided we were obstacles to overcome rather than family to cherish." I couldn't argue with that logic, because in a way he was right. The Terrence we knew, the one we loved, had died long before Isaiah faked his own death. What remained was someone we no longer recognized. 2 more years passed. Isaiah and Angela had a daughter, my first grandchild named Grace. Holding that baby in my arms, seeing her innocent eyes, reminded me of what was truly important. Family wasn't just about blood ties, it was about love, trust, loyalty, things Terrence had destroyed. I made a decision then. I would not tell Terrence about his niece. As far as he was concerned, that part of our family didn't exist. It was too much of a risk, too much of a potential connection that could be manipulated or exploited. On Grace's first birthday, as we celebrated in my backyard in Oakland, surrounded by friends and Isaiah's new family, I realized I had finally found peace. Not forgiveness, exactly. The wounds were still there, would always be there, but acceptance. Acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed, some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and that was okay. Life went on. Love found new ways to express itself. Isaiah, holding his daughter, caught my eye from across the yard and smiled. In that smile, I saw healing. I saw a future. I saw that despite everything we had been through, we had survived. More than survived, we had found a way to thrive. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my balcony one more time, watching the lights of Oakland reflected in the bay. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from that devastating day when I thought I had lost Isaiah, through the revelation of Terrence's betrayal, to this moment of quiet contentment. I thought about the woman I had been 5 years ago and the woman I was now. Stronger, certainly. Sadder, without a doubt, but also wiser, more aware of the complexities of human nature, of the fact that people we love can still hurt us deeply, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away. I pulled out Terrence's letters one last time. I read them both, from start to finish, and then, in a moment of clarity, I made my decision. I went to the kitchen, got a box of matches, and took the letters to the fireplace. As I watched the paper curl and blacken, the words disappearing into ash, I felt something release in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, it was letting go of the anger, the betrayal, the constant wondering and questioning. Terrence would have to find his own redemption. I was done carrying the weight of his choices. The next morning, I called Isaiah. "I burned Terrence's letters," I told him. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," I admitted, like I've finally closed a chapter that should have ended years ago. "Good," Isaiah said simply. "You deserve peace, Mom. You deserve to move forward without that weight." "I'm not saying I hate him," I clarified, "or that I wish him ill. I just can't carry him anymore. He has to walk his own path, find his own redemption if he can. But it can't involve me. Not anymore. I understand, and I support you, whatever you decide." That conversation marked a turning point. I stopped thinking about Terrence every day, stopped wondering how he was, if he had truly changed. I focused instead on what I had: Isaiah, Angela, little Grace, and my own life, which had become richer and fuller than I ever expected after such devastation. 3 years later, when Terrence was finally granted parole after serving 8 years total, I learned about it through a lawyer's letter. He had tried to contact me, the letter said, but respected my wish not to be reached directly. He wanted me to know he was out, that he was working at a community center in Memphis, helping other men avoid the mistakes he had made. He wasn't asking for anything, just wanted me to know he was alive and trying to do better. I showed Isaiah the letter. He read it without expression and then handed it back. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you want." "I don't want anything," I said honestly. "I don't wish him ill. I hope he's genuinely changed. But I don't need to know about it. I don't need updates or contact. That part of my life is over." Isaiah nodded, understanding perfectly. A year later, I received an invitation. It was for a graduation ceremony in Memphis. The community center where Terrence worked was celebrating students who had earned their degrees while incarcerated or recently released. Terrence had enclosed a personal note. "Mom, I'm not asking you to come. I understand if you never want to see me again, but I wanted you to know that I'm doing the work, real work, trying to help others avoid the path I took. If you ever feel ready to talk, I'll be here. But I'll never push, never intrude. I owe you at least that much. With love and deep regret, Terrence." I put the invitation on the refrigerator. It stayed there for weeks. A silent reminder of a choice I hadn't yet made. Isaiah noticed it but said nothing, respecting my process. Grace, now 4 years old and curious about everything, pointed at it one day. "Grandma, what's that?" "It's an invitation," I told her. "Are you going?" Such a simple question from a child who couldn't understand the complexity behind it. "I don't know yet, sweetheart." But her question planted a seed. I thought about it more over the following days. What would it mean to go? Would it signal forgiveness? Would it reopen old wounds? Or was it possible to acknowledge someone's growth without forgetting their past? I called Isaiah to discuss it. "I've been thinking about going to Memphis," I said without preamble. "Okay," he replied carefully. "Why?" "I don't know if I can explain it. Curiosity, maybe? Closure?" "I'm not sure." "Do you think it's safe? Emotionally, I mean." "I think I'm strong enough now to face him without falling apart. But I'm not going for him, Isaiah. If I go, it's for me, to prove to myself that he doesn't have power over me anymore." "Then go," Isaiah said, "and I'll come with you if you want. Moral support." The offer touched me deeply, but I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. No, this is something I need to do alone, but thank you for offering. The graduation ceremony was held in a modest community center in Memphis. I arrived early before Terrence would likely see me. I sat in the back, watching as the room filled with families, supporters, people celebrating the achievements of these men who had overcome so much. When Terrence walked onto the small stage to introduce the program, I barely recognized him. He was thinner, his hair completely gray now, his face lined with experiences I couldn't imagine. But there was something different in his bearing, a humility, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. He spoke about second chances, about the importance of acknowledging past mistakes while working toward a better future. He talked about the men graduating that day, their courage, their determination. And then, briefly, he mentioned his own story. I was once one of the men you might have written off, he said. I made choices that hurt people I loved. I betrayed trust in the worst possible ways, and I paid the price for those choices. But someone once told me that even though they couldn't forgive me, they hoped I would use my time wisely. That hope, that tiny grain of possibility, became my anchor. It's why I'm here today, why I dedicate my life to helping others find a better path. I knew he was talking about what I said at his parole hearing. The words I had almost forgotten had stuck with him, had shaped his journey. After the ceremony, I waited outside. I wasn't sure if I should approach him or just leave, satisfied that I had seen him and confirmed his growth was real. But then he walked out and saw me. He froze, his expression a mixture of shock and something that looked like fear. "Mom," he said softly, not moving closer. "You came." I did. We stood there, an awkward distance between us, two people who once knew each other intimately, now strangers bound only by history and blood. "I don't expect," he started. "I know," I interrupted. "You've said that before. In your letters. You got them?" "Yes." Silence stretched between us again. Other people were leaving the center, congratulating graduates, but we might as well have been alone in the universe. "I'm proud of what you're doing here," I said finally. "It's important work." "Thank you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase what you did." "I know. I would never expect it to. I came here today to see if the change was real, if you were genuinely different, or if it was all just for show, for parole, for appearances. And?" He looked terrified of my answer. "I think it's real. I think you've truly become a different person. But Terrence, that person is a stranger to me. I don't know this man standing in front of me." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. I'm not here to restart a relationship. I'm not here to forgive or forget. I'm here to release both of us from the weight of the past. You found your path. I found mine. They don't intersect anymore, and that's okay." "Is there any chance," he asked, his voice breaking, "any chance at all that someday—" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever, and you need to be okay with that." "I am," he said, wiping his eyes. "I have to be, but thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing this, even if it doesn't change anything between us." I nodded and turned to leave. Then, on impulse, I turned back. "Terrence?" "Yes?" "Keep doing this work. Keep helping others. Not because it might earn you forgiveness from me, but because it's the right thing to do. I will, I promise." I walked to my car, my legs shaking slightly. I had done it. I had faced him, acknowledged his growth, and set my boundaries. I felt exhausted but also lighter, as if a burden I didn't even know I was still carrying had been lifted. On the drive back to Oakland, I called Isaiah. "How did it go?" he asked. "It went," I said simply. "He's changed, genuinely changed, I think, but it doesn't change what happened or what he was capable of." "Are you okay?" "I am. Actually, I really am. I think this was what I needed, closure without reconciliation. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve peace. When I got home, I found Grace and Angela waiting for me. Isaiah had told them I was doing something difficult, and they wanted to be there when I returned. Grandma, Grace ran to me, hugging my legs. Daddy said you were being brave today. I picked her up, holding her close. Daddy's right. Sometimes being brave means facing hard things. Did it work? Angela asked softly. Yes, I said. I think it did. That night, as I sat on my balcony for what felt like the 1,000th time since moving to Oakland, I reflected on the incredible journey my life had taken. From the moment I thought I lost Isaiah, through the betrayal, the revelation, the trial, the long years of processing and healing, to this final act of closure. I thought about the woman I was 8 years ago, blissfully unaware of the storm coming. I thought about how naive I was, how I never imagined the people I loved most could be capable of such betrayal. But I also thought about the strength I discovered in myself, the resilience, the capacity to rebuild after devastation. Isaiah called later that evening. Angela told me you seemed good, really good. I am, I confirmed. For the first time in 8 years, I feel like I can finally breathe without that weight on my chest. I'm happy for you, Mom. You deserve that. Isaiah, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Terrence? Not forget, but forgive. There was a long pause. Honestly? I don't know. What he planned to do to you, what he would have done to me if I hadn't faked my death, that's not something I can easily let go of. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm content with indifference. I don't wish him ill, but I don't wish him well either. He simply exists in a part of my past that I've closed off. That's fair, I said. More than fair. What about you? Today, seeing him, did it change anything? It gave me peace, I said. The peace of knowing that he's not the man he was, that he's genuinely trying to do better. But it also confirmed that we can never have what we had before. And I'm okay with that now. Good. Because you don't owe him anything, Mom. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, nothing. I know. And that's perhaps the most important thing I learned through all of this, that I can acknowledge someone's growth without having to welcome them back into my life. We talked for a while longer before saying goodnight. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the bay, the distant city noises, the quiet rhythm of a life rebuilt. I thought about writing to Terrence, acknowledging what I saw in Memphis, but decided against it. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Anything more would be redundant, or worse, would give him false hope for a reconciliation that wasn't coming. Instead, I focused on what I had. A son who loved me enough to fake his own death to protect me. A daughter-in-law who brought joy and light into our family. A granddaughter who represented hope and new beginnings. These were my treasures. My family, my present and future. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, would always be there. The scars remained, would always remain. But scars were simply evidence of wounds that had healed. They didn't have to define who I was or limit what I could become. As I finally went inside to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 long years. Genuine optimism about the future. Not because the past had been resolved. Perfect endings don't exist in real life, but because I had finally made peace with the complexity of it all, with the fact that some wounds heal but never disappear, that some relationships can't be saved, and that's okay. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. I had breakfast on the balcony watching the sunrise over the bay and made a decision. It was time to truly move forward, not just in words, but in actions. I called Isaiah. I want to plan something, a celebration, not of anything specific, just of life, of family, of surviving and thriving. That sounds perfect, Mom. What did you have in mind? A party, here at the house. You, Angela, Grace, and some of our closest friends. Just people who matter, people who've been there through everything. I love it. When? Next month. That gives us time to plan. And Isaiah, I want you to know how proud I am of you, not just for what you did to protect me, but for the man you are, the father you've become, the life you've built. I could hear the emotion in his voice when he replied, "Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me." The party was a success. We filled the house with laughter and music, good food, and better company. Grace ran around with other children, her joy infectious. Angela told stories that had everyone laughing, and I stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by love, and felt genuinely happy. At one point, Isaiah pulled me aside. "You look radiant, Mom. I haven't seen you this relaxed in years." "I feel it," I admitted. "I feel like I've finally stepped out of the shadow that's been following me since this all began." "You've earned it. You've done the work, faced the hard truths, set boundaries. This is your reward." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I stood on the balcony one last time with Isaiah and Angela, watching Grace play in the yard below. "I've been thinking," I said, "about writing everything down, not for publication or anything like that, just for me, for Grace, for future generations to understand what we went through and how we survived." "That's a great idea," Angela encouraged. "These kinds of stories need to be told, not as cautionary tales, necessarily, but as evidence that families can survive even the worst betrayals." "Can they, though?" I asked. "Survive, I mean, or do we just learn to live with the wreckage?" "Maybe it's both," Isaiah suggested. "Maybe survival isn't about restoring what was broken, but about building something new from the pieces that remain." I thought about that for a long time after they left. Building something new from the pieces that remain. That's exactly what we had done, wasn't it? We hadn't restored our family to what it was before. That was impossible. But we had created something different, something smaller perhaps, but also stronger, more honest, built on genuine trust rather than assumed loyalty. Over the following weeks, I did begin writing. Not a comprehensive account, but fragments, memories, lessons learned. What it felt like to think I had lost Isaiah. The shock of discovering Terrence's betrayal. The complex journey towards some form of peace. I wrote about the hard truths I learned. That love isn't always enough to save someone. That family ties can be both the strongest bonds and the sharpest weapons. That forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. And that healing doesn't mean forgetting. I wrote for myself, for clarity, for closure. But I also wrote for Grace, so that when she was old enough to understand, she would know her family's history, the good and the bad, and understand why certain people were present in her life and others were not. 6 months after the party, I received one final letter from Terrence. It was brief. "Mom, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted you to know that I'm getting married. Her name is Keisha, and she's a counselor at the center. She knows everything about my past, and she's chosen to build a future with me anyway. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything, congratulations or presents, or even acknowledgement. I'm telling you because you were right when you said I needed to keep doing the work for its own sake, not for redemption in your eyes. I found someone who accepts me as I am now, with all my past mistakes and current efforts to be better. That's enough. It has to be enough. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you'll care. But I wanted you to know that the hope you gave me at that parole hearing, the tiny grain of possibility that I could change, that has blossomed into a life I never thought I'd have. Thank you for that. Even if you can never give me anything else. With gratitude, Terrence." I read the letter twice and then put it in the drawer where I kept the other remnants of our complicated history. I felt genuinely happy for him, not in a way that made me want to reconnect or attend his wedding, but in a way that confirmed what I saw in Memphis. His change was real and lasting. I showed the letter to Isaiah. "How do you feel?" he asked. "At peace," I said honestly. He's found his path. It doesn't intersect with ours anymore, but I'm glad he's found it. That's a healthy perspective, Mom. It took 8 years to get here, I reminded him. 8 years of processing, healing, setting boundaries. It wasn't easy. The important things never are. As more time passed, the intensity of those years faded into memory. Oh, the events remained vivid when I chose to recall them, but they no longer dominated my thoughts or shaped my daily life. I was simply Audrey, a woman in her 70s, grandmother to a beautiful little girl, mother to a successful and loving son, living peacefully by the bay in Oakland. I rarely thought about Terrence anymore. When I did, it was with a mixture of sadness for what was lost and genuine hope that he was living the life he described in his letter. But he had become a chapter in my past, not a character in my present. On Grace's 6th birthday, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, Daddy said I used to have another uncle. Where is he?" I looked at Isaiah, who gave me a slight nod, indicating it was my choice how to answer. "You did have another uncle," I told her carefully. "His name is Terrence. But he made some very bad choices a long time ago, choices that hurt our family very much, so we don't see him anymore. Is he dead? No, sweetie, he's alive. He lives far away and has his own life now. Do you miss him?" The simplicity of the question from a child's perspective cut through all the complexity. I miss who he used to be a long time ago, but that person is gone, and I'm okay with that now. Grace thought about this for a moment. "That's sad." "Yes," I agreed. "It is sad, but sad things are part of life. What matters is that we love the people who are here, who choose to be part of our family in good ways." She nodded, accepting this with the remarkable adaptability of children, and then ran off to play with her birthday presents. "That was well handled," Isaiah said quietly. "She'll have more questions as she gets older. And we'll answer them honestly, age appropriately. She should know her family history, all of it." I agreed. Secrets and lies had nearly destroyed us once. We wouldn't build our new family on the same foundation. Now, as I sit here writing these final thoughts, nearly a decade has passed since that devastating day when I thought I lost Isaiah. A decade of pain, growth, revelation, healing. A decade of learning hard truths about human nature, family, and the limits of love. People often ask me if I regret anything, if I would have done things differently if I could go back. It's a complicated question. Do I regret that Terrence made the choices he did? Absolutely. Do I wish our family hadn't been torn apart? Of course. But do I regret how I handled it? The boundaries I set? The closure I eventually found? No. Those were the right choices for me, for my healing, for my survival. I've learned that forgiveness is not an obligation, despite what society often tells us. I've learned that you can acknowledge someone's growth and change without having to welcome them back into your life. I've learned that family is about more than blood. It's about trust, respect, and mutual care. And when those things are broken beyond repair, it's okay to walk away. I've also learned about resilience, about the human capacity to rebuild after devastation. When Isaiah walked through that office door, alive when I thought he was dead, my world shattered and reformed in the span of a heartbeat. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. Everything I believed was betrayed. And yet I survived. More than survived, I found a way to thrive. Before we begin, I'd love to know something. Where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city or country in the comments so we can see how far our stories reach. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. It truly helps our community grow. Thank you for being here. Isaiah once asked me what the most important lesson was from everything we went through. I told him it was this, that loyalty and love are not the same thing. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to let them destroy you. You can hope for someone's redemption while keeping them at a distance. You can acknowledge that someone has changed while also acknowledging that too much damage was done for reconciliation. These are complex truths, uncomfortable truths. We live in a world that loves simple narratives, forgiveness and happy reunions, clear villains and heroes. But real life is messier. Real life is about navigating gray areas, making difficult choices with no perfect options, and learning to live with ambiguity. As I watch the sunset over the bay tonight, Grace playing with her toys inside while Isaiah and Angela prepare dinner, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Not for what happened, I would never be grateful for that, but for where it led me, for the strength I discovered, for the boundaries I learned to set, for the family I still have, smaller but stronger. Terrence is out there somewhere, living his life. I genuinely hope he's doing well, that his marriage is strong, that he's continuing to help others. But his life and mine are separate now, parallel tracks that will never converge again. And I'm at peace with that. This is not the family I imagined when I held both my sons as babies, dreaming of their futures, of Sunday dinners and shared holidays and grandchildren playing with both their uncles. But it's the family I have, the one built from the ashes of betrayal, stronger because it's chosen, maintained because we all work at it, treasured because we know how easily it could have been lost. Isaiah did something extraordinary when he faked his own death. It was desperate and radical and traumatizing for me, but it saved my life, possibly his, and ultimately gave us both a chance to see clearly what Terrence had become. For that, I'll always be grateful, even though the cost was so high. As I close this account, I realize that our story doesn't have a neat ending. Terrence isn't fully redeemed in our eyes. We haven't had a tearful reunion. The family isn't whole again. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some fractures can't be fully mended, and the wisdom is in accepting that and building something new instead of endlessly trying to restore what's broken beyond repair. I'm 72 years old now. I've lived long enough to see that life rarely gives us the endings we want, but it does give us the endings we need if we're willing to do the work to understand them. This is my ending, not perfect, but genuine. Not what I would have chosen, but what I've made peace with. And in the end, perhaps that's all any of us can ask for. Not perfect resolution, but honest acceptance and the courage to keep moving forward. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every click helps our community's stories be heard loud and clear.